Welcome to the premiere edition of Off The Brawl MMA on offtheball.com. Lots to talk about, obviously, with Conor McGregor and UFC 229 just around the corner. He goes up against Khabib Nurmagomedov for that world lightweight title in Las Vegas on October 6th. Plenty on the show today. So I'm going to welcome in two of my guests. Off The Ball team member, Simon Maguire. How are you, Simon? Great to have you on board.
Well, thanks for having me.
You happy?
Very happy, yeah.
Good stuff. And my podcast partner from MMAfighting.com, Mr. Petesy Carroll. Petesy, what's happening, brother? How are you?
I'm good, very good. Thanks so much for this.
Excited about obviously the fight card coming up. We'll get into a minute who we've on this week on the show, but listen, I think the world is buzzing after the press conference the other night. We'll be chatting about it in a sec, but just general feeling off the bat, Petesy, for this fight coming up?
Yeah, I think he did exactly what he needed to do. Everybody's engaged, either one way or the other. I've had a massive mixed reaction to the whole thing, but the most important thing is everybody's talking about it, so job done if you're Conor McGregor.
Simon?
Yeah, I think he hit the right tones. He pushed a few buttons for Khabib. He wasn't too happy, and it's going to be a great fight. I'm really looking forward to it.
Definitely. A lot coming up on the show this week. We'll be speaking about that fight, obviously in depth, because there's so much to look forward to at UFC 229. And we'll be joined by Duke Roufus, who's head coach of Anthony Pettis. He goes up against Tony Ferguson in the co-main event in that fight. And I think that fight has a lot of significance to the main event between Conor and Khabib as well. I think for me, it's going to be a number one contenders fight. So Duke stops by to talk about Tyron Woodley and also what's going to go down in that fight. He gives his prediction as well. We're also joined by Pat Healy, who's actually been in there with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Pat is now retired. He fought him at UFC 165. Really interesting stuff from Pat on how to try and control Khabib and his grappling. So fascinating stuff from Pat a little bit later on the show. And also we'll be joined by one of Duke Roufus's fighters, should I say, in Paul Felder. Paul is obviously a UFC analyst as well for Fox, so really interesting thoughts on what's next for him. He talks about his broken arm coming back from injury and also gives his lowdown on UFC 229 main event. Lads, let's delve into that a little bit more, the press conference. And Simon, put it to you first of all. There was a lot of political sort of related slang from Conor McGregor. There's a few jibes thrown in terms of Dagestan and Chechnya and the region around there. Was that the right tone for you to go around from Conor McGregor?
No. I mean, that's a very volatile region as it is, without stoking the flames and bringing that kind of nonsense into it. He brought it up to get under Khabib's skin. He clearly did. Khabib looked quite agitated at times, and obviously with the language barrier there, he wasn't able to fire back maybe as he would have liked. Now, he could store that for the fight and really take it out if he gets his hands on Conor.
Yeah.
And you'd have to worry for Conor that if he does, it's going to be a long, long night.
You see, the problem is I don't see the problem there, Petesy. I think, maybe here in Ireland we take that kind of thing a little bit too seriously in the build-up to fight and what goes on in the press conference. There was nothing, it was borderline possibly some of the stuff he said, but he didn't cross the line. And any sort of advantage, I think, psychologically in terms of, we can go back to that Jose Aldo, we were both there. Jose was literally nearly in tears. He was so emotionally invested and angry. Every advantage surely counts for Conor in this fight.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not the first time we've seen Conor saying absolutely outlandish stuff like this. I mean, I think before he fought Aldo, he said he was going to go through the favelas on horseback and take the place over. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't even supposed to fight Norman Park once, but he was touching on that kind of Northern Ireland stuff. Especially when he's actually been on Instagram talking about this Chechnya and Dagestan situation. I knew that was going to come. It was obvious. Yeah. He will try absolutely anything to get into your head. He was talking about political issues in Chechnya and Dagestan, which obviously there's been 2 wars in Dagestan, massive issues there. They're probably like a they aren't treated the best in terms of Russia. So yeah, I absolutely thought that was going to happen, and that the bus incident was going to feature. So not surprised at all that he was going to do it, and maybe it's compassion fatigue at this stage, but that's exactly what I expected.
Was Khabib rattled? I thought maybe possibly at the end he was a little bit rattled. For you?
No. I think he was as good as I've seen anyone kind of against McGregor in that sense. I think Diaz was probably the best because he could purely be himself, and I think I think Khabib was being himself. I think obviously he got a bit frozen up when Putin and stuff got coming into it, but when you understand what's going on over in Russia, you can't really blame the guy for getting a bit choked up when that stuff comes up, you know what I mean?
Simon, I'm worried about fight week here when we go in, and especially when the fans get to Las Vegas, depending on how much, of an Irish contingent travels over. I'm sure there's not going to be as many as we saw. We spoke about it yesterday, Petesy, in consideration to UFC 189. Do you think there's maybe an issue here that there could be a little bit of trouble at the fight night?
No, I don't think so. No, the Irish fans have generally been impeccable over there, bar that plane they have to turn around going over to
go forward then.
The Diaz fight. So those idiots didn't make it into the country, but no, I can't see there being any problems. I mean, Conor
because it has got quite personal, between the fans and all that and the build up to that. And I was in Brooklyn, and there is going to be a big Russian community going. I think the UFC, Dana White has come out and said that they've actually upped the security around their fight week all over the place. So that's obviously a positive as well. Yeah,
well, I think Conor has a lot of fans in Russia. I think the Russian fans are MMA fans as opposed to just Khabib fans. I mean, obviously in Dagestan he's huge, but no, I can't see there being any trouble.
I was shocked. I couldn't believe how many people. I saw a video, I think it was courtesy of MMAJunkie.com, and literally I'd say 9 out of 10 of Russian fans pick Conor McGregor to beat Khabib.
Yeah. No, that's what I've been like. I mean, this is something Artem Lobov said a long time ago, before this fight was anywhere near being made. He thought that Conor McGregor, in fact, was making Khabib a bigger celebrity because they've been, tossed about like that matchup would be very bad for Conor and things like that. So he has always said that, that's the case. Like Conor is a global icon now. Whether you like him or you don't like him, he's a global icon. He's always going to be at the forefront of this sport once he's present, and he's bigger than anyone in any country, basically.
Definitely, 100%. Was he a little bit over emotional, Simon? A lot of people were saying that, we spoke with Neil last night in the Eurobash podcast on MMAfighting.com about him being potentially a little bit too over emotional. I don't think we've seen Conor maybe on that level before. Simon, what were your thoughts on that?
I think what played into that was the fact that there wasn't a crowd in the arena, because usually he'd say something, then there'd be cheering and roaring and all sorts, and there'd be a silence, or there wouldn't be a silence. But it sounded like he was just going off on a tangent and losing the rag a little bit. Yeah. But I'd imagine if you went back to his previous press conferences and silenced the crowd, it would be just about the same. I agree with you on that one. I think you need a minute sometimes, when you have the applause, you'll stop and you'll gather your thoughts. And maybe that was why it came across, I don't know if fakery was the right word. Myself and Adrian had a little bit of let's not go there.
Back and forth the other day, but that wouldn't be the word I'd use. It's all calculated from Conor McGregor in terms of what he does in the build up to these fights. But really interesting stuff, all the same. Okay, I want to get the first interview over the line today. I caught up with Duke Roufus to talk about Tyron Woodley, Conor McGregor, and lots more. We'll be back in a few minutes, obviously, to talk about that UFC 229 card in more detail. Duke Roufus, all the way in Milwaukee. How are you, my friend? Delighted to speak to you again. Always a pleasure.
Honoured to be your first guest. This is awesome. Hello to everyone in Ireland.
We're good. I think everyone's a little bit excited after the ongoings last night. Obviously, the UFC 229 press conference, and a couple of your guys obviously involved on that card, the two Pettis brothers. First of all, I just want to get your thoughts on the press conference last night between Conor and Khabib. Obviously, you have a big interest in it as well with Anthony fighting Tony Ferguson. What were your thoughts on it last night?
It was entertaining as usual. I mean, Conor was Conor and Khabib was Khabib. It's going to be a great fight. It's who and gets their style of fighting going. We all know that Conor can drop anyone with that left hand or his right hand, and Khabib, he's a human bear if he gets on top of you and mauls you. So it's going to be a classic wrestler versus striker.
We'll get back to that, and I want to get your prediction, obviously, at the end of the interview here. But for Anthony getting back in there and Sergio, the interesting thing for me was seeing them both announced on the same card, and I think it's something that Anthony said before, that he didn't want to fight on the same card as Sergio. What was the thought process in the selection and having them back on the same card together?
I just think the one time it happened before, it was a little bit of bad luck, bad situation. But I got to tell you, this time around, they've really motivated each other, a special energy that is just amazing for this camp. It's a special effort going into this fight. Not everyone gets to get the 9 lives like Anthony Pettis. I mean, here, he was on the downswing a year ago. Now he's back on the upswing. He has a great performance at International Fight Week, and now he's fighting the number 2 contender in the world, former interim champion Tony Ferguson. And I got to tell you, this kid is prepared I'm so proud of him. He's really worked his tail off to get back to form, and he's added on to where he once was. Special. He's still a very young man. He's only 31. I was there when Anderson Silva fought Chris Lieben in his UFC debut at 31, and we call Anderson the GOAT. So, if that's the case, it's exciting, to be able to, get this type of momentum back. And I got to tell you, it's not my prediction, but my hope is, no disrespect, I mean, Conor McGregor is the fight that we all want to fight if you're a fighter, because he's a big gate, a big attraction, the big fight. I'm hoping that, Anthony does his business, Conor does his business, and that would be a really sexy, tasty fight for the fans. It would be an epic fight for fight fans worldwide.
Definitely. Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on, obviously, the process of Anthony getting this fight. What was it, the fact maybe, he stepped up for that Al Iaquinta fight? Sorry, not Al Iaquinta, to fight Khabib. He was, in the running to take that fight. Was it the UFC sort of willingness and respect for Anthony? He's a former champion. He had no qualms about stepping up to take that fight. Have they maybe rewarded him with a shot against probably the number one contender in Tony Ferguson?
Well, originally, the fight that was going to be made was Al Iaquinta and Anthony as the main event at UFC Milwaukee.
Okay.
But, Dana reached out to Anthony. Anthony met out at the UFC offices with him, and we got the heads up, hey, let's be ready possibly for October 6th. So, Anthony's always been a company guy. He fights whoever they put in front of him, win, lose, or draw, and especially the toughest of characters in that division. So I think they're just have an insurance plan just in case Khabib doesn't make weight.
Yes.
Conor's never had an issue with it, respectfully. And, Khabib, that's a lot of weight for him to cut. So I think they got Tony lurking in the secondary, and Anthony is the double backup plan. That being said, if everything goes right, we're going to have two great lightweight fights. It's going to be a big part of the next stage of the lightweight division.
Do you think then, ahead of Poirier Diaz, do you think this is the genuine number one contenders fight? The winner of this will be granted a shot at either Khabib or Conor?
Yeah, I do, just because it's going to happen on the same night. And if my man shows up and does what he used to do and just did in his last fight, there is going to be a note for it, because we're in a new stage of the UFC. It's not about the rankings, even though Tony's number 2. It's about who can sell pay-per-view. If you want to be a pay-per-view seller, you got to, Conor's proven that time and time again. It's good to have him back, good to have all his problems that he went through earlier this year behind him. Glad that he looks quite motivated and ready to go. But at the end of the day, it's about selling fights. That's why Mayweather's talking about fighting Pacquiao. Our sport's unlike any other sport. We don't follow a schedule, a season, or rankings. We sell big fights to people, and that's what pay-per-view is. And your goal is to build a pay-per-view type champion or draw, and that's what we're seeing. With Anthony Pettis' rebound, we got a tough test ahead of us. I mean, Tony Ferguson's a beast. His numbers speak very, great for his success. But honestly, Khabib said it, and I'll say it, that stylistically, Anthony matches up very well with Tony.
Yeah, I look at this fight and I think both guys, they're attacking-minded fighters. Something's got to give in this fight. I can't see this fight potentially going the distance. Just the styles of both guys and the way they fight. Anthony's very good off his back. He's very good on his feet, as we know, those kicks. Tony Ferguson, goes forward on the front foot, looks for very unorthodox, and we know how good he is also on the ground. There's a finish in here, I feel, Duke. Anyway, how do you feel about how the fight's actually going to pan out as a contest? Do you expect a finish?
Yes, I do. Big time. First things, Anthony said the key thing to me 2 days ago, yesterday, we were talking about the fight. He goes, I said, the rubber guard this, a few other situations. He goes, this is going to be fun. I look forward to getting down there with him. And I'm just like, holy man, this guy's ready. I mean, he's, you don't say Tony Ferguson in fun usually. Yeah. Most fighters don't say that. And, his mindset coming into this is special. That being said, there's some things that Anthony does that's very underrated. I see Tony's trying to box a lot. Anthony that's why we were at the boxing gym last night. One of my longtime guys I train in boxing, Coach Mercedes, we were over at the gym training with high-level guys. One of the guys Anthony's actually trained with before, Robert Brandt, is getting ready to fight for a middleweight world title. Luis Arias is one of Anthony's childhood friends, fought for the world title. And he trains with Jorge Linares, too. So Anthony's no slouch. What set up the win against Chiesa was the counter right hand.
Is that, we spoke about that before, Duke, him training with Jorge Linares. Has that been a crucial part, do you see, in this fight? Bringing in that, boxing element and keeping it very, very technical in terms of boxing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realize, I'm 2-0 as a pro boxer. I grew up boxing in a gym where my amateur coach is one of the Olympic coaches for the USA. My older brother's managed by Ray Leonard, and he boxed out of Kronk. So boxing has been a huge part of my life. And then when I trained in Thailand, I was able to hook up with a really good Cuban boxing coach. And my coach from Thailand in Muay Thai was on the national and Olympic team. Not only was a 4-time Muay Thai champ, he was a national boxing champ. So boxing's always been a huge part of the Roufus family formula and the way we train fighters. So it's just very, you watch Sergio, he's methodical with his hands in there. He's, he's the Lomachenko of the UFC, if you ask me. He can methodically outbox many fighters in the UFC.
Is it about finding consistency for Anthony going forward? And, obviously he's been, lost, win. This win puts him in a really good position. Is it about getting that back-to-back wins?
Oh, man, I just talked about this yesterday with Coach Cushman, that, when Anthony is injury-free and things are going his way, he's something special, and that's what we've seen. People forget the first injury that almost ended his career was that patella on his knee. Benson Henderson kicked his knee in that fight, and that was a hard one to come back, and he came back and beat Gilbert Melendez. Then the next one was the elbow surgery from a mishap in wrestling, not to mention the shoulder surgery before he won the championship after he won the WC title. So he's gone through some horrific injuries that I believe really affected his confidence. And now that he's feeling great and he's got, the kids will say swag, he's got his mojo back, he's feeling quite great. And I mean, I see some incredible performances. Last camp, when him, Paul Felder, Jared Gordon were getting together, training, I wish I could share to the world some of the magic that happened in the sparring. Not just from Anthony, though. It takes two to make a great dance. I mean, Paul, Jared, some of the other guys in the gym really help him push Anthony. That's the thing. You got to have the right people in there training with you. And we found some good people that, are really helping him. But I also believe high tides raises all ships. We don't have a big team, but I want to float every one of their battleships high.
Definitely. Moving on, Duke, that's a fight I can't wait for UFC 229. It's an absolute barn burner, as we like to say here. But, we spoke in Brooklyn, after the incident with Conor McGregor, and obviously a number of your fighters, Anthony, Paul Felder, had fights fall out in that card. You said Conor McGregor was a flash in the pan. You weren't happy at the time. I don't think anyone was that was there on the ground. What are your thoughts now on Conor? Maybe he's sort of rebuilt himself over the last couple of months. What's your general feeling towards Conor McGregor?
Well, what I meant about being a flash in the pan, that style of bravado and marketing, I mean, once you're the real deal, you don't need that anymore. And let's face it, he's the real deal. But, I think that he was, cheeky yesterday at the press conference, but that's who he is. That's who Conor would be if we were having a few pints with him in the pub. That's just who he is. But at the same time, he's not been in the media much. He's not. He seems very focused, and I think he's great for the sport. He's great for Ireland. He's great for Irish people. He's great for fight fans everywhere. I wish the guy nothing but the best. Do we want to fight him and face him? Of course, because to be the best, you want to beat the best. That being said, I mean, he's good for our sport, and I'm glad that he did a new deal with the UFC. I'm glad that he's back because, again, high tide raises all ships. I'm not one of these people that I hate on other camps or fighters, and, all props to a guy who's doing it big. I want Conor McGregor back. He brings more people that normally don't watch UFC, MMA, our sport. The spotlight he brings is wonderful, and what he's done for the country of Ireland. I just shared a picture on Instagram. I was at the first UFC in
Why
2009.
They closed down your Instagram account. Why?
I've shared too many. I've shared too many licensed videos.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to promote my fighters with UFC videos, and it looks like I got clipped. So you can follow me at CoachDukeRoufus.com, or excuse me, at Instagram. So it is what it is. No problem. I understand. I just thought I was doing right by promoting my fighters and the sport, and I guess with all this new streaming stuff, they're really shutting down on the content out there. I understand it, and so we'll build it back up. I'll keep sharing fun stuff. That being said, I was talking about the first Ireland UFC. There's only one Irish fighter on there. And for me, someone who was at the... Yeah, exactly. For someone who was at the first UFC Ireland, to see the growth in Ireland, it's amazing. And, I mean, even the what I'm really into right now is the amateur side of MMA, to the point I'm working on the teenage and youth MMA with the no head strikes, we call pancreation in the USA. But I'm a big believer in the IMMAF, and I know that the Irish have a strong team every year at the World Championships. Actually, one of my boys who won the championship, I believe in 2015, Brendan Allen, fights for the LFA middleweight title tonight. I believe in that system. It makes great fighters. Shorty Torres came from that. It was a tough flyweight in the UFC. So I really just... Again, what happened in Ireland is incredible, just from amateur to professional, and even bigger names coming. It's only the beginning over there.
Definitely. The fight itself, and you being obviously a decorated striker and a striking coach, you're some of the best guys in the world there. What way do you see this fight going? Do you see Conor getting the better of Khabib with his unbelievable striking, or do you see Khabib potentially landing a takedown and getting this to the deck and mauling Conor? How do you see it panning out?
Khabib is really strong, but who's he dusted off in the first 1 or 2 rounds of a fight? The one thing, I think this fight is going to look a lot like a lot of Pettis fights, where Pettis weathers the storm, first round, second round, third round, he finds a way to finish fighters. Conor and him are very much alike in that way. I always tell people 9 out of 10 fighters would have given up in their Dos Anjos loss. Conor is not going to give up in that heat, and he's got that special tenacity that, unless Khabib knocks him out with one blow, a lot like Darren Till last a few weeks ago. That's how I felt with Till. That's why we worked so much on chokes, because we knew Till wasn't going out. The boy's tough. And Conor reminds me that the only way you're going to get him, you better latch his neck, or he'll even let you break his arm, I think. He's that type of individual. That being said, I do believe that Conor might weather the storm and catch him. But one thing Conor knows...
But for you, Duke, is his striking as good as people say it is? Do you think he's one of the best strikers in mixed martial arts looking on? Conor?
Well, I think his striking's really good for what he does, and it works phenomenal. I mean...
do you think he could do more?
He doesn't need to against the opponents he's fighting. Meaning, why would he kick against Khabib? Khabib will take him down if he kicks. But, when you got a left hand like he does... that's something to count on. Here's the thing that Conor and the team know. They know Khabib has to come to him. So that's what he works on very well, counterpunching. And I love the way he fights. I use a lot of the same tactics before, and he's very similar in a lot of the things we do and the way we think. I love the way that he counterpunches, and that's the thing. You saw Chad Mendez thought he was going to wrestle with Conor like that. You've seen, other people who thought they would maul Conor, and actually when you try and maul him, you play into Conor's game like Jose Aldo did. Yeah. Conor is really good when you step to him. The reason why Diaz gave him trouble, Diaz had the patience, and he wasn't focused on wrestling Conor where he could stay outside. That's something that Anthony Pettis would do against Conor if we get to that juncture of fighting. That being said, could Khabib win? Yes, of course. I think he's a beast too. I mean, is he personally driven about some of the Dagestani comments and, the lack of respect he feels from his own government with Putin? And, it's gotten pretty heated. That being said, we've seen some guys who are pretty heated get in the octagon with Conor, and instead of drinking whiskey, that guy drinks ice water before fights because he's ice cold in his veins against some killers. I mean, I just think it's an interesting matchup. The type of guy, and I love Khabib. He's so respectful and cool to me. I think he can win, but I just think that McGregor, he has the ability to catch you coming in. It's something special. He reminds me of a more refined Mickey the Pikey, It's just, just when you don't think this kid's, and boom, the guy drops. It's just, it's going to be a great fight. I'm so excited to be there. It's going to be incredible. UFC 229 line up really, really nicely. Just a couple more if you do. I do appreciate the time. Tyron Woodley obviously coming off that fantastic win over Darren Till a couple of weeks ago. One of your guys, obviously, as we know. A fantastic performance for me. I think was more or less flawless. Everything looked and seemed to go to plan the way you guys wanted it to go. You mentioned the chokes there a moment ago. That's ultimately what finished the fight. What's next for Tyron? Does it have to be Colby Covington now? Probably. I mean, what I tell people is this. My job is, I'm kind of like the last person in the line of command on the team. My job isn't to figure out who to fight. My job is, once we figure out who to fight, is how to beat them. I get the last call. With the fight set, and let's beat them. So. Well,
a good one. Are you trying to figure out how to beat Colby Covington now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, similar to the way he just caught Darren Till. I mean, Tyron and Conor are similar. The way Tyron caught Darren Till was very Conor-esque. We worked on that, the zigzag, slipping that jab and zapping that cross through the hole. That's what set up the beginning. The end there was that knockdown. Colby Covington, if he walks at Tyron, will be in a world of hurt. I mean, we're talking about, he's a great wrestler, great fighter, tenacious on his pressure. I mean, but the thing is, he got touched up and bloodied by Damian Maia. He had a great scrap with Dos Anjos, but sometimes some lefties don't fight well against lefties, and I think an awkward wrestler lefty, another lefty trouble. But Tyron, I think this will be our 7th training camp in a row at fighting a left-handed fighter. So
it works in your favor.
Oh, for sure. And one of the blessings I have, my older brother is a left-handed fighter. 2 of the Thai trainers that lived with me for 2 years, are both left-handed. So I understand, though. That's why Anthony looks so good against Chiesa. I understand how to fight left-handed fighters very well because I grew up with that. So Tyron, his comfort level of fighting southpaws is really well. I mean, I would love. I mean, here's the thing. I got nothing against Colby. He's an entertainer. I mean, I don't take any of this stuff these kids say personally. I'm not fighting. I just hold the spit bucket and give a couple of advice. I mean, I got the best seat in the house, and I'm not personally invested in the opponent. I'm only personally invested in the guys I train. So I don't get involved in all that other stuff. That's for the entertainment, the fight hype. Most of these kids, man, they're super cool cats, and I'm friends with a lot of the fighters in the UFC. I mean, Darren Till, I mean, I was a big fan of that kid, and I even said to Darren after the fight, I'm an underground Liverpool fan, so I said if I come over, we gonna hang out.
Don't be telling me that, Duke. I don't want to know that. You know what? You know what team I support.
I know. I'm sorry to hear that.
Come on.
But he even invited me to stay at his house, you know. So I might have to make another trip back to Anfield.
You know, you're always welcome in Dublin, Duke. We always say that to you. We've shared a beer or two together over the years. I want to ask you, Duke, is this fight, you know, I think it's the one everyone sort of wants to see because, you know, there's a whole trash talk element from Colby. Tyron's gone a little bit back and forth as well. There seems to be a lot of investment in this fight from the promotion as well. I feel as though they want to do it. Do you think this is going to happen at UFC 230? Obviously with Dana White saying John Jones isn't going to headline that fight card now.
The only issue why it won't happen, the first right hand in the first round that Tyron landed on Darren, if you see it, Darren did a great tactical job of duck diving his head. So when Tyron hit him with the right hand, his thumb hit Darren's forehead really hard. And he's got some ligament damage that we're trying to get figured out. And he's gone and gotten the MRI. And, you know, right now we're just waiting for the release from a doctor if he can do this or not do this. You know,
when are you going to hear back?
Probably next week. Same thing with Paul Felder. In 2 weeks he gets released. So we were hoping to get him on UFC Milwaukee. That's not going to happen. You know, the problem is with MMA, those little gloves, they're so much more exposed on the hands. The possibility of hurting yourself, especially when you do hit like Tyron. So that's the only thing. And Tyron hasn't really even talked about that. Maybe I shouldn't have let the cat out of the bag, but that's something that, you know, Tyron wants to fight as soon as possible if he's healthy. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's tit for tat. You know, Colby wasn't available for this date. And I know Colby's pushing for New York, but respectfully, we might not be ready for that date. I'd love to be in New York in November at the Garden. There's no better place to fight, but, you know, you can't do that without a healthy thumb on his right hand, you know. So that's just, you know, the speculation on that. I mean, right after the fight, we thought it was pretty bad. It's getting better, but, you know, we'll see. I mean, maybe, you know, he could ride shotgun on the John Jones Brock Lesnar fight. Maybe that's our timeline. I can't comment because I'm not head coach Dean Thomas, and it's just that's the knowledge I know. And you know, I know that the one thing I advised as his friend, former fighter, is make sure you fight when you're 100%, because he already did a solid for the UFC. Of course. The timeline that we took the fight, we did it on short notice. They needed a somewhat short notice. They needed a title fight. We stepped up for the company. Tyron was a company guy. Darren was a company guy. You know, do you want him to do the same thing again? I mean, we're coming up here. How many weeks is it till New York? 6.
6 weeks, yeah. 6 weeks.
Same thing again, right? So, I mean, here you're talking about a guy who would be put in back-to-back situations for 6 weeks. You know, he already did it. You know, I feel like it's like the draft here in the United States. You can't double jeopardy a guy. You drafted him once. You can't draft him again in 6 weeks. It's like I said, if he's healthy, I'm all for it.
Definitely.
But it just all comes down to health.
Yeah. I think it's the fight everyone wants to see next in the welterweight division. And I think, you know, Tyron's up there with the welterweight greats now, you know, maybe 1 or 2 fights more away from me from being, you know, right up there, right at the very top of the list. Fascinating times ahead in the UFC welterweight division as well. Duke Roufus, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Always enjoy speaking with you. Do appreciate the time, my friend. Hope to speak to you soon in Las Vegas, possibly.
Yeah, we'll see you there. I'm going to have my little daughter Lula there too as well. It's her first UFC trip. So the Duchess Lula will be, you know, my little one will be having fun in the whole event. She's going to enjoy it. You know, she knows what Dad does. So she's excited to see the backgrounds of my work, and it's going to be fun. And as well as the Duchess, she's very pleasant. The better half of me, definitely. Much better looking and smarter and all that other stuff, you know. But I look forward to seeing all the Irish fans out in Las Vegas. I can't, you know, I used to say the Canadian fans are the best MMA fans, but honestly, Ireland the spirit of the people. It's always fun when the Irish fighters, especially obviously Conor, but all the support you give, it's fun. Whether you're fighting against them or fighting with them, it's a blast.
Always a pleasure, my friend. I look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas too. Appreciate the time.
All right, thanks, my man. See you, brother.
And that was head coach of Roufus Sport, Mr. Duke Roufus, one of the most decorated and best striking coaches in the world of mixed martial arts, and a guy who's obviously coaching Tyron Woodley, Anthony Pettis, Paul Felder, to name but a few. Really interesting stuff, I thought, on the Woodley situation, lads. He said there Woodley's out of the fight. He's not going to fight Colby Covington at UFC 230. That was sort of the rumoured fight from the UFC that was thrown about. But, the one thing I'm glad to hear is that this fight is actually looks like it's going to finally happen, Petesy.
Yeah, well, it's the fight that was always supposed to happen. Putting Darren Till in there made absolutely no sense. They rushed that. I think they were hoping that they could have another McGregor with Darren Till, and that could possibly happen in the future, but it was very rushed, I felt. And as well as that, I don't mind them not fighting at 230 because you need space to build that fight. This is huge, it's huge ramifications in terms of the political situation in America. You have Tyron Woodley from Ferguson, Missouri, and then you obviously have Colby Covington, who's parroting Donald Trump, who's met Donald Trump, all this kind of crack. That's the kind of thing that will reverberate with the Americans. And if you've looked at the pay-per-views up until Conor came back there and he's going to change everything, they've been awful. It's been a steady decline for MMA. So they need something that's going to reverberate with the American citizens, and they can't keep on relying on Conor.
Do you think, I feel as though Colby doesn't get the credit he deserves, regardless or not what he says, what he does? He's put himself in the limelight. People are talking about Colby.
Yeah, well, this is the age of exposure. It doesn't it goes back to what Conor did at that press conference. Once people are talking, it doesn't matter. But if you're going to talk about someone who doesn't get the credit they deserve, no one fits that bill better than Tyron Woodley. The man's an absolute genius. He's a brilliant fighter. He's constantly come up with ways with beating different, very skilled fighters in different areas. He's an absolute genius, and he definitely doesn't get the credit he deserves. I think this is the fight that pushes him over and kind of gives him that credit that we all wanted to see him getting, because I really don't think Colby Covington can beat this guy.
We'll talk about Tyron Woodley, Simon. People have said that he's right up there in terms of the best welterweights of all time. Is it a couple of more fights? Is it now? Where do we put Tyron Woodley in that ranking?
It's difficult to say where exactly he is right now, because he's in his prime. It's what he does next. And obviously just the GSP fight is hanging there. The Colby fight is there. Does he fight Wonderboy a third time?
No.
No?
No. Lawler Wonderboy, I want to see that fight. I know Stephen was calling for it, so that's something I'd love to see, and maybe let this sort of situation play. I think there's enough contenders coming through now in the welterweight division. For me, it's the second best division in mixed martial arts at the moment. And you've Kamaru Usman, you've obviously Darren who's come up short, but he's a guy who can either go to 170, make another push, stay there, or go to 185. He's options. There's plenty of other guys coming through as well.
There's also the Rory MacDonald, his last loss. Now, MacDonald has a title fight this weekend against Mousasi in Bellator. But would he ever down the line want to get that one back?
I'm sure he would. If the money's right there for Rory. But you take into consideration Rory this weekend against Geiger, a fantastic fight. Unfortunately, it's not on our TV screens. We can't watch it, which is very frustrating. And we've talked about that in depth over the years, Petesy. But, the thing for me, people often talk about, Rory gets one more shot in that nose, his career is potentially done. He's had so many injury problems and bad luck with that nose over the years that it's something that he's going to obviously have to consider if anything like that happens again. But would you ever see a point where we're going to see Rory MacDonald potentially return to the UFC or Geiger?
No. To be honest, no, I don't. I think the fact that the UFC let him go to Bellator kind of talks about, it kind of speaks to their situation with Rory. I've heard people talking that the nose break, it's happened so many times that they kind of figure, is this putting a kind of a shelf life on what he can do in the promotion? Now, look, he's been absolutely brilliant in Bellator. I think he looks like the best signing they've ever made, to be honest.
Great.
I don't think anyone has ever gone from the UFC to Bellator and just proved their worth so significantly. I think him and Mousasi is a fantastic fight. It's a real shame that we can't watch that. I mean, that's the type of fight that will get Bellator a lot of brand recognition over here, which they still don't have. They don't have brand recognition over here. My dad's never heard of Bellator. My ma doesn't know what it is. They know what the UFC is. They think the UFC is MMA, and Bellator need to sort that out if they want to play with the big boys.
And we can go on the tangent about Bellator as well, in terms of the amount of fighters they've signed from this island and the UK. I think it's up to 38, 40 fighters, Petesy.
Yeah.
So that's something really that they need to establish and, you know, make a statement in this market in terms of getting a live TV deal there. And hopefully we're not too far away. Potentially something might happen in the coming months, coming up to Christmas, and the rumoured Bellator card that's going to be on here in Dublin. A couple of more other things interesting that Duke sort of picked up on there. He believes Petesy Ferguson, and we had a little bit of conversation before we came back on air about this. Simon, for you first of all, does the winner of Petesy Ferguson get a title shot next, ahead of Diaz Poirier, which is going to headline obviously UFC 230 in New York?
I think the most important thing is that Petesy Ferguson is on the card as a backup in case either Khabib or Conor don't make it through it. We've had a number of cards in UFC which have fallen apart because the main event, there wasn't a backup there, or there wasn't somebody who had a camp. The two boys are there ready to step up. I'd imagine it'll be Ferguson who'll get the nod if somebody in the main event falls out. In terms of the fight itself, it's two brilliant striking technicians going at it. It's a 50-50 fight for me. If gun to my head, I'm edging towards Ferguson.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that one as well. Obviously, Petesy hasn't showed any sort of consistency over the last few years. Petesy, an issue for me, you know, and we haven't really maybe talked about it. So I don't want to curse the fight because I tend to do that because I was over in Brooklyn the last time, and obviously Tony fell out on the Friday. But in terms of weight issues, you know, we've had a few for Khabib. Should we be worried about the weight coming into this fight at UFC 229?
I wasn't until I talked to you and Neil Seary about it, I'll tell you that much. Like, he did look very big when he faced off with Conor, but people look at Conor, like, and they remember at featherweight he had trouble making that weight. As soon as he got George Lockhart into his camp, he didn't have trouble making featherweight. It was just more of a comfort thing to him to go to lightweight at that stage. And we saw the same thing with Darren Till there in his fight against Woodley. Once he got a real system in place with nutritionists guys who've been doing it for years, he actually made the weight fine. So, I mean, I think Conor makes the weight easily, but I don't think he's as big a lightweight as Khabib. So it's hard to gauge. Like, I mean, if we're looking at the two of them standing beside each other, yeah, Khabib looks bigger, but it's hard to tell how far he is off, especially when he's wearing a big woolly jumper, you know what I mean? I really hope it isn't. Like, you'd hope that in a situation like this, where he actually has a real chance to beat one of the biggest names ever in MMA, he would kind of get a nutritionist involved, he'd get someone involved, because honestly, if he came into that fight and he doesn't make weight, like he's ruined himself with the UFC. If whatever happens, if this main event doesn't happen after the bus and them, you know, going from saying it's the most disgusting thing that's happened in MMA to, you know, being the greatest thing, let's push this all over the place. If this fight doesn't happen, whoever ruins this fight, you'll be forever on Dana White's blacklist as far as I'm concerned. I just don't think you get off it.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Most definitely. It's a fight we're all very much looking forward to, I think, the world of mixed martial arts, and obviously the rest of the world who are delving in for a little fancy tickle at this fight card. Fancy tickle? Whatever that's supposed to mean. You know me, PT, I come out with some pretty random stuff.
Sometimes I think I don't know, you know.
But let's get to our next interview of the day. Pat Healy, a man who's been in there with Khabib Nurmagomedov back at UFC 165. He gave us a little bit of a feel onto what it's like to get in there with the great Dagestani. Pat, obviously you've been in there with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Just, can you give us a description of what it's like being in there? You went full 3 rounds back at UFC 165. Just tell us what it's like being in there with Khabib and how tough his grappling obviously is and his wrestling.
Yeah, it's real tough, obviously. A lot of people make a big deal about how strong he is. That's one question I get, like, oh, how strong is he? Well, it's not his strength that's overwhelming. It's his constant movement and his ability to kind of shut down what you're doing, especially on the ground. Like, when we grappled, I just couldn't do anything. Like, I couldn't move my hips. He really, like, isolated me down. And like I said, it wasn't from his strength. It was more from his positioning. And, you know, he's always in good position. And, you know, he is, like, very explosive and quick, too.
He tends to trap the hand when he gets you on the ground, and we've often seen Khabib do that. Neutralises one hand so he can obviously land shots with the other. How tough is that to neutralise and not let him get you into that position effectively?
Yeah, man, it's very tough. He's very good about, like I said, he kind of out-positions you to open up those opportunities to do things like trap your hand and stuff. And it's not like he's overpowering you. He's just put you in such a bad position where he knows which way you're going to go. So he's kind of staying one step ahead of you. And, man, once you get there, luckily, I wasn't some of the recent beatings he's put on people have been a little bit worse. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to get caught there with him. He's real good about, holding his position, knowing when he can hit, and, kind of keeping it like that, like hold, hit, hold, hit, hold, hit. So you never have an opportunity to get your game going.
You're a guy, obviously, Pat, now, since you've called it out with your career. You're a guy who's always been a coach, but you're obviously more of a senior role now. Looking on at fights, what have you seen, should I say, in the major improvements in Khabib's game?
I mean, I think it's his willingness to open up more. Early on, he'd kind of out-wrestle guys, like throw them down and then kind of let them back up and throw them down and let them back up, or he'd take you down and hold you real tight. But now he seems to have evolved where he's doing a lot more damage. And against like Barbosa, all that leg trapping stuff he was doing is pretty cool, and I think different from what a lot of people are doing. It's something you see a lot in like college wrestling here in the States and maybe international wrestling, but where he just kind of traps your leg. You can't really move one way or the other, and then he's just teeing off on you.
I think you've tried that a few times as well in the past. In your Strikeforce days, I remember a number of fights when you got guys into crucifix positions. Do you think, obviously striking is the area of weakness for Khabib? I think we've seen that, in the Ally came to fight last time out, and then before that against Michael Johnson when Johnson hurt him momentarily in New York. Is that the key for Conor McGregor in this fight? Everyone says that, that Khabib would be crazy to stand with Conor. Do you feel his striking is well below par?
I wouldn't say it's well below par. It's just, I think the main thing he's got going with his striking is he's a really explosive and he's like an incredible athlete. And then he does really awkward stuff. He doesn't move like a regular, guy does on his feet. So I think that can throw a lot of people off. So I think the tell will be if Conor can pick up on that and read those weird things he kind of does.
What's your general feeling for this fight then, in a couple of weeks' time? Obviously having been in there with Khabib in the past and looking on at Conor and seeing the kind of striker he is, it's obviously the classic striker versus grappler matchup. How do you see it panning out yourself, Pat?
Man, I've been so back and forth on it. I really don't know how to call it. I think the tell is going to be how often Conor can kind of break distance and those Khabib's initiations to close the distance. If he has that happening a lot, Conor's so good with his timing, I think he's going to eventually catch him coming in. But if Khabib can get in and stay in and kind of wear on him there, not let him get any space, that's going to be the biggest thing, I think, that will kind of decide the fight.
Where would you measure the advantage in terms of, keeping distance and range and for either guy in this fight?
Well, I think Conor's one of the best at catching a guy coming in, closing the distance. He's so good with his timing. So I think he's got the advantage there. He did, in some of his past fights, I don't think people give him enough credit on how good of a kind of grappler, and everybody's
the Diaz fight. Yeah, it was the second Diaz fight. He did some some really good, I thought, takedown defense, especially against the cage. Yeah. So I mean, if he can defend that stuff, and then obviously Khabib's a better wrestler than Diaz, but
You can see how like torn I am on it. Like every time I think one way, but Khabib does this so well. Conor does this so well. So it'll be interesting. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is if Khabib's got to close the distance and keep the distance closed. He can't have where he's closing the distance 5, 6, 10 times around, because Conor's gonna catch him if he does that a lot.
Pat, I have to put a shotgun to your head. Who are you picking to win the fight and that lightweight world title?
Well, I'm going to say for now, Khabib. I just watching the press conference, I thought Conor was too emotional. He's always really good about, he's a great, the guy gets under people's skin, and he's downright hilarious when he's, picking people apart. But this time just seemed like he was way more emotional about it. He obviously, they're bad blood and stuff. Like, I felt like he's let that get to him too much. So I'm going to pick Khabib, but if you ask me again in a week, I might have a different answer. So that's what I'm sticking with right now.
Just one more for you, and it's interesting you said that in terms of going into a fight and having that, relaxed, cool mindset in comparison to something where there's bad blood or animosity. You've obviously experienced that in your career, and what way has it sort of panned out for you in terms of that thought process?
What always worked for me was is just having no emotion towards my opponent. So the more emotional I'd get, I was always a little bit over aggressive, so that would play into it more. So kind of approaching it as a job, like, hey, like I don't like this guy, but this is what I gotta do. We're not friends. Like, we're not gonna be friends afterwards, but this is just business. I think the more you let kind of your emotions get into it, the worse decisions you make. So it'll be interesting to see, especially over the next few weeks leading up, if Conor can kind of reel that in, or keep his head calm as he comes in.
Pat, it's been a pleasure. Do appreciate the time, my friend.
Hey man, I always appreciate it.
That was Pat Bam Bam Healy, former mixed martial artist, now retired, living it up in Portland, Oregon, and I believe he's become a fireman. So fair play to Pat, and EMT and all that. So really good insight there from Pat. He's been in there, as I said, with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Really interesting stuff, Petesy, in terms, and something we always look at and we've always talked about, what Khabib does when he gets to the ground and when he gets to the position. He always looks to trap that arm. And Pat said there, it actually wasn't the brute strength of Khabib, it was about his positioning and how he does it. This is probably one of the most crucial aspects in this fight. If he gets Conor to the ground, it's probably lights out if he does get that arm trapped.
It's a nightmare situation. If you look at Conor and you look at Khabib, they have incredibly different styles. We obviously know one's better at striking, one's better at grappling. But really, aesthetically, it's an incredible comparison as well. Like, I mean, we were there in New York and they both fought that night. When you watch Conor fighting and he's in full flight, it's like poetry in motion. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Aesthetically, it's very pleasing. I think that's where the casual fans can come in and watch him so easily and get behind him. On the other hand, Khabib Nurmagomedov is a grueling, horrific experience when you're in there with him. He's gonna, like, you see the look in people's eyes after they've been in there for a round with them. Edson Barboza, they look soulless, absolutely soul destroying. It's not as fan friendly to watch, but it is one of the most incredibly dominating fighters I've ever seen in his strength area. You know what I mean? He's absolutely incredible. And that pinning of the arm, you see, if guys will be on their side like this, and they can either block their heads or try to get up. And you're kind of fucked if you do and you're fucked if you don't, because you're going to get elbowed. If you open yourself up, you try to get this, it's going to open you up to more punishment. And otherwise you can just block. So you can either block or try to get up. Either way, you're getting elbowed through the head. It's absolutely horrific. And we've seen him talk to guys in that situation. Can you imagine how demeaning that is, though? Yeah. You're on the ground, you have 1 million people watching you on the TV, and this fella's saying, come on, just give up. Come on, what are you going to do?
You're better than this.
It's awful.
Dana, give me title shot.
Talking to the... Come here, can I get the title shot next? Like, it's absolutely mental.
Give me title shot.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the difference.
That's what he does. And
it's horrific.
people do look at it as a funny sort of element, but he's very, very serious. We saw it against Ali Kinta, we saw it against Michael Johnson. And something I want to get to just now in a second, from the Eurobash podcast, we spoke with Javier Mendez and the mentality and Khabib actually implementing the game plan. Let's get to this video now. It's only a short little clip and we'll come back and have a chat about the mentality.
Well, obviously, you know, I can mention quite a few times where Khabib's done things where I don't want him to do. So guess what? He's going to do what he's going to do with Conor, and Conor's going to do what he's going to do. And I don't think John is going to be able to control what Conor wants to do, just like I can control Khabib, what he wants to do. Look, these are two great fighters, and they're going to do what they're going to do. Our job is to get them as prepared as possible. But come fight time, they're going to do what they're going to do. You know, all of a sudden, for I know it, Khabib's going to stand with him, and I'm going to be screaming my head off, losing my head, thinking, what is he doing? What is he doing? But if that's what he wants to do, that's what he's going to do. Obviously, that's not what I want. I don't want nothing to do with Conor's stand-up. He's too good.
That was Javier Mendez from the Eurobash podcast on MMAfighting.com, hosted by none other than Mr. Peter Carroll there. That was a really interesting one for me there. Just in terms of his coach, Javier Mendez, openly admitting that he doesn't stick to a game plan. He wants to stand and bang a lot of the times instead of using his strengths. Is that a massive negative, or is that just something that their camp are coming out and saying? Because we've heard, in fairness, we have heard the corners in the past. You know, Khabib, you have to do this, you have to do that, and he clearly hasn't been listening or obeying the corner.
It would be incredibly foolish to do that with Conor McGregor. My God,
that's a possibility.
No, only if he can't get the fight down. That has to be his modus operandi there. Jesus, if he decides that I'm going to spend the first round striking with Conor, that's a ridiculous game plan. You're going to end up on your arse. That's the way it's going to go.
Conor wants that, obviously.
Yeah, but I don't think that. I don't honestly think that this guy's going to come out and start throwing feints at Conor and sticking his jab in his face or whatever. I think as soon as the opportunity presents itself, as soon as he gets in that range where he can snatch him, that's what he's going to be doing. And you won't see him just go in for a double leg and take him down. He's going to chain. It's going to be takedown after takedown after takedown. He won't let him breathe once he gets inside that range on him until he gets him to the ground. And it's either going to be Conor lumping the head off him and him falling down as he tries to do it, or else Conor going down to the ground and then entering that miserable place that we just talked about.
A world of hurt. Do you see any variations in this fight, Simon? Do you see anything other than the classic striker versus grappler matchup that everyone's talking about?
No, I don't think we're going to go too far from that actual synopsis of it. If Khabib tries to show that he can stand with Conor, he's out. It took him 2 minutes before he took a shot at Michael Johnson, and in those 2 minutes Johnson dominated the stand-up. Johnson isn't on McGregor's level. He's very flat-footed. He was jumping in and out as opposed to sliding in and out. Conor won't need 2 minutes on the feet. I think it'll be very, very early night. You look at Damian Maia. He was jiu-jitsu specialist when he came into the UFC. He had 5 wins by submission. Everyone was thinking, if this guy gets his hands on you, you're done. And then Nate Marquardt knocked him out in one punch. So every fight starts on the feet. I think Conor will take it by knockout.
All right, yeah, obviously lots more predictions and permutations in the build-up to this fight as we get closer to it, just 10 days out from the biggest fight in UFC history. Okay, I want to get to the next interview of the day. I caught up with Mr. Paul Felder to talk about his recuperation from breaking that arm against Mike Perry from a spinning back fist. Absolutely gnarly stuff if you saw that fight. He also weighs in on UFC 229, Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. All the way in Philadelphia, it is Mr. Paul Felder, no stranger anyway to me. Paul Felder, how are you, my friend? Great to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I'm loving that set. Looking super fancy over there, buddy.
Do you like it? About time. I think it's great. We've got MMA on a mainstream outlet here in Ireland. So yeah, pretty pleased. I'm looking forward to the first show. Anyway, obviously this is going to be a part of the first show. How are you, first of all, Paul? Obviously the injury with the arm, you broke the arm in that fight against Mike Perry, throwing that spinning back fist. How are you, my friend? How's the arm healing up?
It's doing great, man. I forget that I even have anything going on with that. It's gotten to that point. It healed really, really fast. Took me about 6 to 8 weeks, and bones completely healed through. I would say I'm about 90% cleared for combat. They just want me easing into sparring. I have to get used to getting hit there again. It's just going to be a little sensitive for a little while. But as far as everything else, I'm cleared to go. I'm cleared to lift any kind of weight I want. Hit the bags, hit pads. I can wrestle. I can do jiu-jitsu again. So this week is really the first week of training coming up that I'll be able to do something other than cardio or punch stuff with my left hand. So I'm excited to get started this week.
Paul, obviously, I know you quite some time, and I spent a little bit of time with you in the build up to fights and on fight week. You're a guy who's never out of the gym. It must have been a very trying time for a guy like you. I know you had the injury, the cut and the laceration you sustained against Francisco Trinaldo, but that must have been the biggest frustration, not being able to go in and start some pads.
Yeah, it's just frustrating, it's my job. I mean, I know I have commentary to keep me a little busy now, but it's what I do. I wake up, I go to the gym, I stay learning, I stay in shape, and I enjoy it. So when I can't do it, it's not only, okay, I can't do my job, but I'm also missing a part of me that makes me happy, So for the first few weeks, it was rough. But once we got past that, and I met with the doctor again, he started giving me things I could do, and I really just kind of took to those things, and that kept me at least occupied for the first month and a half. Now it's like, all right, let's go. I'm ready to get back on the mats and start putting in some real training hours.
Paul, the fight itself, it must be a weird one for you, obviously, because you stepped up to 170 pounds, made your welterweight debut in the UFC. You broke your arm in the first round. Incredible as well, the actual break itself. It was straight through that portion of your arm. And to fight on so well and to go to decision. I know it was a loss, but is it probably the best loss you could probably ever have under the circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was able to show the MMA community and my fans, what Philly fighters are made of, and who I am as a person and what I'm able to push through. And sometimes you got to have a performance like that. You've got to have one where you just show your grit and show your toughness. And I've done those in the past, but nothing in comparison to having a broken arm for. Yeah,
talk to me. What was it like? Was it were you going on the adrenaline? Because it was evident for me that you were seriously badly hurt after you threw that spinning fist. And I remember, obviously hearing Duke in the corner as well. And I think you were saying to Duke, and Duke was just going, you have to just manage with one arm and do as much as you can with the one arm. What was your thought process in there?
It was chaos, man. I can tell you that is one of those fights where, looking back on it, it was madness. It was madness in the corner. I'm trying to deal with my arm. Duke's trying to get me focused. The cut guys are patching up cuts. You're bleeding everywhere. You're tired. And every time I took a break, so when I would sit on the stool in between, that's when I would really start to feel it. That's when I could feel the bones moving around on my arm. I was trying to make a fist. You could actually feel the bones kind of grinding together. And if you look at the break on my x-ray, you could see what I was feeling. It was actually those bones kind of just grinding next to each other. So it was just probably the craziest MMA experience I've ever had in my life, dealing with the arm, dealing with a guy who hits like that and having a broken arm. It was fun at the end of the day, though. The hospital trip wasn't fun. But.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to mention that to you in a moment. You were sitting, I think, 4 hours on the trolley in Las Vegas hospital, blood squirting down your face, and it didn't look pretty anyway. That side of you, I think you posted a picture on your Twitter after the fight. It was pretty insane.
Yeah, it was not the best, and since it was such a busy hospital, Jared Gordon and Craig Egelberg, the guys that were with me at the hospital, couldn't even be back there for 90% of the time. So I'm just sitting there by myself. My cuts are still bleeding. My arm's obviously in pain, but at least I was put in a temporary splint at that point, so I was able to deal with that. But it was just one of those reflective moments as a fighter. It's like, what am I doing? What am I doing?
You're the craziest bunch of sports athletes in the world. But just before we move on, does that give you a massive amount of confidence knowing you're going to be able to overcome such a situation like that and fight on? And listen, I think it was a split decision as well in the end. Like, you weren't too far away from winning the fight.
Yeah, it was close, man. Every time I watch it, I'm like, I put up one hell of a fight for having a busted arm. I think it just gives you the confidence to know that no matter who I'm in there with, I'm going to give them hell, and I can take some beatings and come back through whatever's going on.
Did it feel like a loss?
Yeah, it always does. It does. I know to the fans and everything like that. And I got a ton of support from people based on that fight, man. I got to say, I got a lot of love, but it's, as a fighter and anybody that's a competitor out there, that doesn't matter how close it was, how great it was still an L on my record.
Okay, Justin Gaethje, I know, made a suggestion to you after the fight in the octagon and when you were interviewing him. James Vick as well, there was talk of that from Milwaukee. I don't think you're going to be fit in time for Milwaukee. Is that true?
No, I'm not risking it. That was the dream. And me and Duke talked the other day. He gave me a phone call, and he was like, let's be honest. We were being really positive in thinking that there was any chance that you would be ready by. And the UFC PI and Heather and all those guys, they kept telling me there is a chance. And here's the thing. I am going to be cleared to fight at that point. But I personally want to have at least a month or so where I'm sparring out of camp, getting used to my arm, then start a training camp. So, I mean, all the doctors were kind of right in that I will be ready by December 15th, but I won't be ready and comfortable to do a full training camp, especially if it's somebody like a James Vick or a Gaethje or anybody even in the top 20. It's like, these guys are all so good. I'm not risking hurting my arm again, or even worse, I probably won't hurt my arm again. The doctor said I have just as good of a chance of breaking any other bone in my body at this point than I do that arm. Probably more of a chance of breaking other bones.
The bionic forearm?
Yeah, because now it's supported, and that bone is calcified, and it's probably stronger than it was. But if I'm not comfortable blocking, I start favoring it. That leaves me open for shots that maybe I would have never gotten hit with. So, yeah, I'm thinking January. I think January is going to be perfect.
Yeah, there's some big cards on in January.
Because I did want to fight before Christmas. It's, my family's, we have a huge Christmas Eve party. I would be there with my mom, my brothers, my daughter, all my aunts and uncles. But I'm going to be there regardless. I just won't be able to eat any chocolate chip cookies and junk food.
Junk food, you talk about you talk about that. So what is the process going forward? Obviously, your last fight was at 170. Is it going back down to 155? I know your mom, Marion, doesn't want you to go back through that again. It is a big cut for you. It's a 7-week process. You're not one of these guys that can take a fight at 155 pounds on 2 weeks' notice. It's just a no for you. In terms of how you felt in there against Mike Perry, obviously not cutting the mass amount of weight you did to get 155. What is your feeling about going forward? It seems as though you're pretty much focused and set and going back down to 155.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that the reason I want to have a little more time is because it's been a long time off. I'm a little heavier than maybe I would like to be. So I would like to get a lot of good training, get in really good shape, then start my training camp so that the weight cut doesn't have to be as bad as maybe it has been in the past. And I don't want to have to, really murder myself the last couple of weeks. So I want to get that all on point. Yeah, it looks like 55. I'm not canceling out any chances of 70 in the future or on short notice. If the UFC calls me up and they need a replacement, I can make 70 on short notice. I can't make 155 on short notice.
How did you feel in there? What's the major differences in terms of how you get into the octagon on fight night and how you actually feel in terms of performance levels and cardio and fitness?
Physically, I felt great. I had energy through everything. Like, you've seen me. So normally, Wednesday, Thursday, it starts getting, I'm drawn out. I look like a different person. There was none of that for 170. I felt great. I just cut a couple pounds the morning of weigh-ins in the tub, and that was it. And I was good to go. I was eating all week. I was eating rice. I was eating potatoes, carbs, fruit. And but here's the thing. I felt great. But I was almost too happy, Niall. I was almost too happy.
A happy Paul Felder? Don't think so.
I think I need to be I feel like a caged animal a little bit when I fight. I feel like I need to be a little freaking miserable. And the whole process, it's fight week. I got to cut that weight. That first battle not having that felt really weird to me. But maybe it's just because I'm so used to.
So you were almost too comfortable. You felt.
Yeah,
you need that nasty edge.
I didn't have that edge.
Wow, that's amazing. And listen, you've done it before, obviously. Since I think it was your first fight in Roufus sport. I think you sort of even said that to me. You had to starve yourself away in the end of the gym in Roufus sport, living in that room, and sort of a manner in which sets you up for your fight. Interesting stuff. So it does look like 55, as you said there. That seems to be your process. Is Justin Gaethje in the taking, or is it James Vick? What is the name? Because Vick was obviously a name that came back up after his loss to Justin, and then Justin also said it in the octagon to you.
I like both those fights. I don't think Justin will take the fight with me because I don't think he's got
the balls
as much to gain from me other than a headache the next day. It's not going to move him up the rankings necessarily. I mean, it might get him fight of the last 100 years with me, but
well, he did say it on the TV broadcast to you, so surely it's something he's interested in if he's going to say it on a platform like that. No.
I think he's interested, but I think we just kind of like. I feel like we respect each other and have a mutual kind of buddy feel going on. Even if we fought, I feel like I like Justin Gaethje. I like what he represents. I like how he is. He is what he is. So I feel like he was just kind of poking at me a little bit because he had probably heard that and just wanted to call me out on it. But I would love a fight with him. I'd love a fight with James. Pretty much anybody in and around the top 15 right now. A lot of guys are booked up too, so it might just be a matter of seeing who wants to take the fight when and what Sean Shelby and those guys think. But I think definitely January, whatever that first ESPN show is, something I'm putting my eye on right now. So we'll see. We'll see where it's going to be and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully the arm just keeps going the way it's going because it's healing really well.
Good stuff. I'd watch any of those fights. Really, really exciting fights on paper, either or. You mentioned the division is pretty tied up at the moment. We've two massive fights in the UFC lightweight division coming up on Saturday week in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the T-Mobile arena. Obviously, a couple of your teammates on the card as well. Anthony Pettis, he's going up against Tony Ferguson in an absolutely smashing fight, and for me, probably a number one contenders fight for that world title fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor. You're a guy. You've done brilliant. You've got a lot of sort of plaudits from the media and fans alike, the job you've done with Fox on your analyst role. And that's a lot of the reason why I wanted you on this week, is to talk about that fight, Conor and Khabib. First of all, your excitement levels. I know you're a guy who watches a lot of fights. Thoughts off the bat, and how good basically this fight is for the sport.
I am excited. I can be honest and tell you that that's not something I'm making up just to act like I'm being a good company guy. That fight does excite me. It is the fight that needed to happen, and it's finally happening. We get to see Conor tested against all these things that everybody doubts about him. Right? Well, how's he going to handle somebody with such powerful wrestling and ground and pound and all this stuff? And as far as Khabib, we know he's been touched. He's been touched by Michael Johnson. Like, we keep bringing that up, but nobody's been able to put him away yet, even big punchers. So a lot of questions are going to get answered, and I think it's great for the sport. I think anytime there's a matchup that the fans want, the company wants, and the fighters can finally get together and sign a contract and get it done, it's going to move things forward, and it needs to move the division forward. It's been kind of clogged up right now. And I think that fight is the first one that really can move things around. And then you got Anthony and Tony on the same card. So I think we're going to see a lot of movement in 155 coming up really soon.
When you look at the fight as a contest, Conor and Khabib, everyone, it is. It's not rocket science. It's striker versus grappler matchup. But in terms of the fight itself, what has Conor got to do to win this fight? Is it land that left hand, once, or is it going to be something a little bit more complicated? Because it's been very much sort of black and white the way people are looking on at this fight. If Khabib gets him to the ground, it's done. Will we see any variations from what everyone is saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think Conor is a well-rounded mixed martial artist enough to know that if he gets taken down, it's not necessarily over. You know what I mean? I think he's got the scrambling ability. I just think if it continues throughout a 5-round fight, that's when he might start to fade and have a lot of issues. Because we've seen him fade before, and I know he says he's in great shape, and I'm sure he is, but there's something about the way he fights or the way he approaches things that towards the 4th and 5th round, he's going to be tired. When a guy like Khabib, you don't want to be that guy. But I think Conor's got to do more than just land that left hand. I think he's got to just have the best night of controlling distance, which is what he does well anyway. So I think he's got to go out, run out to the center, and not let Khabib back him up. He's got to figure out a way to keep Khabib guessing himself and questioning whether or not he wants to go in for that shot with Conor. If he can do that, he can knock him out. He can win. If Khabib can get Conor on his heels, backing up and not able to set with that left hand when he looks to counter, then it could be, all Nurmagomedov. But man, I think I'm so excited because I really don't know. I keep thinking about it, and I want to say Conor just because every time I think he's not going to win, the son of a bitch goes out there and knocks somebody out cold. You know what I mean? So it's just hard to bet against that guy right now.
Do you think the 2 years out is going to have a big effect on Conor? I know we've had the boxing and the conversation with this tonight with Petesy Carroll and Neil Seary. Do you think that's going to be a major issue? Neil sees it as a big positive, having that whole boxing camp for 4 months and the fight with Floyd Mayweather. It's going to be a big learning curve in terms of adding further repertoire to his stand-up skills.
Yeah, I just think McGregor is one of those guys that kind of stuff, with the amount of confidence and craziness that he's got going on, I don't think ring rust is really going to be too much of an issue for him. And I think he'll be healthy. I think he did have a lot of issues. I think we forget that too. He was dealing with a lot of knee issues and things like that, and he had a thumb or a wrist problem for one of his fights too. So he might be healed up and feeling fresh. And I think more than anything, he's hungry to get in there because, look, Conor doesn't necessarily have to do this, right? He even said it himself. I don't have to go in there and fight for this money. I want to do this because I love doing this and I want to shut him up and I want to shut all the critics up. So I think that's a positive way to be coming into a fight, is that you're doing it for a reason, for a statement, for legacy, as opposed to doing it for money.
What's your whole thoughts on obviously the press conference the other night? There was a lot of people saying it was a bit OTT from Conor, going along the lines of political geo sort of references, and obviously mentioning a Kadyrov and calling Khabib's father a coward. What were your thoughts on that? Just part of the game, part of the build-up? Yeah,
he's insane. I mean, he's not afraid to go there. You know what I mean? He went there. He went after his dad. He attacked Ali. He made fun of him in every way he can. He's trying to get under his skin. That's what he does. And Khabib's a hard guy to do that to, right? He's not an easy guy to rattle. He's a pretty cool customer. So to do that, you got to get dirty. You got to get political. You got to bring his religion up. You got to bring his father and his manager up. You got to make fun of him and be belligerent a little bit with him. It's all smart. That's what he's doing. That's why he's drinking. That's why he's doing all this stuff. He's doing it to drive him nuts.
Did he rattle him, in your opinion?
I think Khabib did a pretty good job at keeping it collected. But I think I think with the comments of the day, I think he can't help but be a little bit pissed off. I don't know about rattle, but pissed. But that's what Conor wants. But I would say Khabib did a really good job of being him and being himself. And that's what he's got to do to win that fight. He's got to just be Khabib. He can't go in there like Jose or Eddie and get a little riled up. It's hard to do, man. I know I would have trouble doing that with my personality. So I give Khabib a lot of credit for how he handled some of the attacks that Conor threw at him.
Yeah, no, they don't call you 0 to 100 for nothing, Mr. Felder. Just one final one before I let you go. I do appreciate the time. Ultimately, we're not going to be having you on the show again before the fight, but who gets the job done? If I have to put a shotgun to your head, as I said to Pat Healy the other day, who's getting the job done here in Las Vegas? Who's walking away with that World UFC lightweight title? You're like me, buddy. I've been going back and forth in it, solidly for the last 2 weeks.
I really do, bro. I'm the same way. I think everybody really is, because I think when we first talked about this, right, it was like, oh, Khabib, easy. Yeah. But like anything Conor does, as it starts going on, you start going, oh.
He puts that doubt in your mind. He puts that doubt in your mind. He definitely does.
He does.
I agree, 100%. It's a strange way of looking at it, but...
Hey, my nickname's the Irish Dragon. Even though he threw some stuff through bus windows and kind of caused me a headache.
And your fight fell out as well. Have you forgiven Conor for that?
One of them checks you're sending to people. I'll go with Conor because now I'm going to ask him for a little discretionary bonus after this fight if he beats Khabib.
Are you being serious about that, or is that a joke?
No, I'm totally joking. No, UFC took care of me. Trust me, I'm not going there.
Paul Felder, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Looking forward to seeing you get back in there. Hopefully, as you said, the end of the year or just
and the very end of the year or early next year.
Mr. Felder, always a pleasure. Do appreciate the time. Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, man. I love talking to you.
And that was UFC lightweight and Fox analyst Paul Felder. Obviously, best wishes to Paul on recovering from that arm injury. Petesy, let's just touch on that quickly. We saw that fight against Mike Perry. Paul really interestingly said to me there in that interview that he feels as though Paul cuts a huge amount of weight. It's a 7-week process for him to get down to 155. But he said he missed it. Just something like almost perverse in a way, that he needs that negativity and starving himself really to get that edge. Yeah,
Conor used to say the same thing, before his belts and stuff like that. He used to say it helped him get into like a war state of mind. Like, in fact, he'd kind of put it on his opponent and he'd say, like, this man is making me starve myself. This man's making me do all of this stuff. And then that's why we see him blow up at the weigh-ins, obviously, when he's face to face, just thinking about burgers. But that's something I've heard before, all right, yeah.
And he's picking Conor, he said, to win the fight. Yeah, I think it is. That's interesting. We just touched on before we move to talk about some of the major issues in the world of mixed martial arts. It's going back and forth, even with the fighters. Conor, I think, the more the fight goes on, is making us believe somehow, like he always does. He has this sort of aura that we feel as though, even if you're not picking him at the start, by the time the fight starts, you're going to be picking him to win it. Yeah, when it was first muted, maybe this time last year that this might happen, I was like, Khabib's going to get him. He's going to ragdoll him. Doesn't have a chance. And now it's, like I said, I think Conor's going to win by knockout in the first round. Yeah, the closer it gets, and I know I'll be changing my mind in a couple of weeks' time. I know you're edging towards Khabib, and I did start out with that, but I'm going towards Conor. We'll talk about that obviously next week, and we'll give all our final picks. I'll have changed my mind 10 times. I'll already be picking Khabib by that time. That's how close I believe this fight is in terms of what we're going to see and what way it's going to play out. Okay. A couple little bit more bits to talk about. Obviously, Rory McDonald, Gegard Mousasi, we talked about that a little bit earlier on. Just a prediction, lads, for the fight. I don't want to spend too long on this because we're actually short of time here. Rory McDonald, Gegard Mousasi, fantastic fight in Bellator MMA. Probably one of the best fights of the year on paper in world mixed martial arts. Petesy, who are you going with? I'm going with Gegard. I just think that he's more natural at middleweight. He's a fantastic striker. He's very well rounded, and as we said earlier, Rory's nose doesn't tend to hold up that well. Yeah. I think that'd be a massive problem with a guy as pinpoint as Gegard if he managed to get the jab in his face early. Simon? I think Rory knows his nose isn't in the best shape, so he's not going to have his head sticking up too much. I fancy McDonald on points. I don't. I'll have to go with Gegard Mousasi as well. I think, if Gegard was still in the UFC, and I said this for quite some time, that he would be challenging for that UFC middleweight championship and maybe potentially even champion, in my opinion. I think he is one of the best middleweights in the world. It's the mindset, I think, on Gegard these days. He's really improved from having big entourages to really sort of singling down his camp and not having a lot of yes men around him. And I think he'll openly admit that. And what a wonderful fighter he is. So looking forward to that one at the weekend. Listen, we have to mention it. John Jones is back in there. He's going to be cleared very, very shortly to return to the UFC action. He's not going to headline, according to Dana White, at UFC 230. We can get into the ifs and outs and the buts and everything else about, we want to talk about USADA and the way they've handled this whole situation. Absolutely, it's been a mess. It's been ridiculous. An absolute mess. And I think, if you want to listen to a show where it's quite well explained, I thought Luke Thomas, your colleague, did it very well on the MMA area yesterday. He had Malky Kawa on. But it was, in terms of what I took from it, it was very much the case. What Malky was saying is, and we've talked about this, Petesy, as well in the past, that when, a positive sample comes up from USADA, it's just tarnished. It's straight out. There's a brush. There's no sort of due diligence that is done. in order to see if it was a mistake, whatever. They flag it straight away, and I think that is a major issue that's tarnishing these guys with a brush.
As soon as you make a mistake, Josh Barnett proved they can make a mistake. That's it. Anything's like, it's all up in the air now. It seems ridiculous. The whole thing seems ridiculous. How can they have exemptions for Jones, exemptions for Brock Lesnar, all this kind of shit? Like, it's not good enough. That's not what we need. If you're going to bring out in an anti-doping party, make sure they do the job. Otherwise, what's the point? If you're going to let the lads who sell more pay-per-views do whatever they want, it's just another black eye in the sport of MMA. We're already having trouble, people taking this as a legitimate game. This is not helping at all. They got this in so they could sell the company for $4.4 billion. No other reason. Make everyone think it's a sport. And ever since they sold it, they've done exactly the opposite. So, like, you know what I mean? They need to sort it out. If they either want it there or they don't, they need to sort it out one way or the other, because it's not fair on the fighters. They had no say in this. They're getting tested 24 hours a day and they're barely making a living wage. It's absolutely ridiculous. What do we do?
There's talk John Jones,
well, it's not doing the job. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Well, it's not doing the job. If Brock Lesnar can come in and fight a guy and then and piss hot on that night, and then he's coming back as well now apparently to fight Daniel Cormier, it makes no odds. You're not doing anything, and there's still a guy fighting him there who has to deal with whatever damage this guy put on him when he's full of steroids or whatever he had. So it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not working. Get rid of it. To be honest, it's just I don't think it's working.
Yeah, I think we'll get more in depth into that in the coming weeks, because that's an issue that's just not going to go away. Obviously, as you mentioned there, the return of Brock Lesnar as well. So we'll talk about that definitely in more detail in the coming weeks. And maybe we might even hear from Mr. Cow himself if we get a hold of him.
Or Brock.
Or Brock. We'll get Brock on. We'll get Brock in studio. Right, we do that for the crack.
Yeah. Won't fit through the door.
Definitely. Listen, yeah, it's for me, it's just an absolute mess at the moment in terms of what they're going to do with that. Is it Gustafsson next? How do you feel about that, Simon? That is the talk, that is the word, that it's going to be Alexander Gustafsson's going to get the next go at John Jones.
Yeah, I hope so. I'd like to see that fight rerun. It was a brilliant fight the first time out. I don't see why it wouldn't be the same again. And if you're trying to reignite the light heavyweight division, let them at it.
Definitely. Fight I'd love to see. I think it makes sense as well, just to ease them back in. Not in terms of a fight, I mean, just they can't give him a title shot straight off the bat. It would make no sense. Well, they probably will.
Yeah, they could. They'd do anything for these lads, you know what I mean? If you're making money, they'll bend over backwards for you. That's the problem at the moment. Yeah. This wasn't kind of happening half as much as it was until they sold the company, and now it's Brock Lesnar and DC shouting at each other in the...
Yeah, there is very little fluency and consistency in terms of what the UFC are doing in general with a lot of their fighters that have, obviously had issues with USADA. So, it's a big worry, and I think it's going to be a big worry for quite some time. But, realistically, they're not going to get rid of USADA. I wouldn't imagine that they would. Point to talk about
They've ruined people's careers, you know what I mean? And then that's ridiculous.
I totally agree. Okay, lads, gonna put a line under the first episode of Off The Brawl MMA on offthebrawl.com. Thanks a million, Petesy, for coming in and joining me today. Where can the guys find you?
At Petesy Carroll on Twitter. Sorry, I was going to say Blanchardstown. But at Petesy Carroll on Twitter, and at the Eurobash podcast every Tuesday
on MMAfighting.com. Simon Maguire, what a pleasure it's been. Have you enjoyed it?
No, yeah, it's great to get the show up and running, and we're looking forward to getting it kicking on now in the coming weeks and months. And I believe you're off to Las Vegas, are you?
Yeah, potentially am. Yeah, going off to Las Vegas next week for the fight. So keep it locked down.
Will you be dialing in on the Skype machine?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll manage something from there. Yeah, sure. Why not? It'd be a bit rude not, I think, when you're in Vegas and not do at least one Skype call.
Yeah,
only for you though, Simon.
Well, we'll get Petesy back in next week, and we'll get you on the blower.
I'll host the thing next week. Don't worry about it.
Well, there you go. Yeah, we'll put Petesy in the hot seat. He'll take over.
Don't want that, lads. You don't want that.
Petesy, you're a wonderful host.
No, I'm terrible.
The Eurobash podcast. Listen, guys, do get involved with us if you want to join in the conversation here. Hashtag Off The Brawl. Any questions, anything you want to raise up, get involved, and we'd be happy to read them out next week on the show. So from the first premiere edition of Off The Brawl on offthebrawl.com, MMA version of the show. The guys are back with the boxing as well this week, so go check that out. Ronan Mullen in the hot seat. So from Simon Maguire, Petesy Carroll, Niall McGrath, it is good luck and good night. Thanks, guys.